Once upon a time, there was a princess who went out into the forest and sat next to a cool well. She took great pleasure in throwing that golden ball of hers up into the air and catching it. Oh, but once it went way too high, and she held out her hand, and with her fingers curved to catch it, oh, it fell right to the ground and it rolled and rolled right into the water. Horrified, the princess followed it with her eyes. Oh, but the well was so deep that she could not see its bottom. Then she began to cry bitterly. I'd give anything if only I could get my ball back. My clothes, my precious stones, my pearls, anything in the world. Well, at this, the frog stuck his head up out of that water and said, Princess, why are you crying so bitterly? Oh, she said, you ugly frog, how can you help me? My golden ball has fallen into the well. The frog said, oh, I don't want your pearls, your precious stones, or even your clothes. But if you'll accept me as your companion, which means you let me sit next to you and eat from your plate and sleep in your bed, and if you love me and cherish me, then I'll bring the ball back to you. The princess thought, what is the stupid frog trying to say? After all, he has to stay in the water, right? But maybe I can get my ball back. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say yes. And so she did. And she said aloud, yes, for all I care. Just bring my ball back to me. I want my golden ball and I'll promise everything to you. Well, the frog stuck its head under that water and he dove to the bottom and he returned a short time later with the golden ball in his mouth and he rolled it right onto the land. Well, the princess saw her ball once again, and she rushed to it, and she picked it up, and she was so happy that she held it in her hands again, that all she could think of was running home and showing her family. The frog came after her. Wait, well, I actually called after her. Wait, princess, take me with you like you promised. Princess, princess. Oh, but she paid no attention to him. Well, the next day the princess was sitting at her table when she heard something coming up those marble steps out front. Plop, plop, plop. There came a knock at the door with a voice that says, Princess, princess, open the door for me. She ran and opened the door. It was the frog, whom she had completely put out of her mind. Oh, frightened, she slammed the door and she ran and returned back to the table. Well, the king saw that her heart was pounding and asked, Why are you afraid? Oh, there is the disgusting frog out there who had got my golden ball out of the water. I promised him that he could be my companion, but I didn't think that he could ever leave the water. But now he's just outside the door and he wants to come in. Just then there came a second knock, and the voice said, it called out, Youngest daughter of the king, open up the door for me. Don't you know what yesterday you said to me down at the well? Youngest daughter of the king, open up the door for me. The king says, What have you promised? What you must keep whatever you promised. Now you go let that frog in. And she obeyed her father, and the frog hopped in and followed her up to her chair. Well, after she had sat down, he called out, Lift me up to your chair and let me sit next to you. The princess did not want to, but the king commanded her to do so. And when the frog was seated next to her, now push your golden plate closer to me. I want to eat from it. Oh, she had to do this as well. When he had eaten all he had wanted, he said, Now I'm tired and I want to go to sleep. Take me to your room, make your bed, so we can lie in it together. Oh, the princess was horrified. When she heard this, she was just taken over with grief. She was so afraid of that cold, icky frog and did not dare to even touch him, much less lay next to him in her bed. And she began to cry. And her father says, he got angry and he commanded her, You better do as you promised, young lady. There was no helping this. She had to do what her father wanted. But in her heart, she was bitterly angry. She picked up that frog with 2 fingers and she carried him up to her room and they climbed onto the bed. But instead of laying that frog next to her, she threw him against the wall. Now will you leave me in peace, you ugly frog? Well, when the frog came down, onto the bed. He was handsome and just stunning, and he was her studly little prince. And he became her dear companion. And she held him in esteem because he was so fantastic. And she did all that she would promise, and they fell asleep together with pleasure. Hmm. The next morning, the prince's faithful Heinrich arrived in a splendid carriage covered in feathers and gold. It would just glistened, and he had been saddened by the king's enchantment that he had no place. He had to place 3 iron bands around his heart to hold it in place because it was broken, and he was just overtaken with sorrow. So to keep his heart from bursting into pieces, he had these iron bands put around his heart. Well, the prince climbed up into the carriage with the princess, and his faithful servant stood at the rear to drive them to his kingdom. After they had gone a short distance, the prince heard a loud crack. He turned around and said, "Heinrich, the carriage is breaking apart." "Oh, no, my lord, this is not the carriage, but one of the bands surrounding my heart. I suffered such great pain when you were sitting at the well, when you were that miserable old cold frog." Well, once again, the prince heard that same crackling sound, and he thought that the carriage was breaking apart. But it was those bands that were springing off the heart of Heinrich, all because his master was now redeemed and happy.